evening, good day, good afternoon, depending upon your time zone. I've learned to think in terms of time zone and space and place in a different way since the pandemic. It's a thrill to have you all here tonight. My name's Craig, and sidekick to my right, probably to your left or right, don't know, not sure, over there is Sue. And
hello all.
We are proud to be co-presidents of the Conscious Capitalism Northeastern Ohio chapter. And I don't usually get that right. I usually stumble through the words, but I got it this time after a few years of saying so. We've got a number of board members with us tonight. Lynn Carpenter, founding chapter member in so many ways. We have Anastasia, who is leading our learning committee and is really responsible for an awful lot of what's happening right now. Thank you, along with Amanda O'Connor. Amanda, anyone wants to wave. Amanda's our coordinator, helps us with all things communications and ops here in our committee. And if I miss anyone, it's just simply an oversight as I play the video game of admitting folks. We're gonna have a number of people joining us tonight. And it's a conversation with Rust Belt writers. And Anastasia in a moment as our learning committee lead. We'll be speaking a thing or two about these two gents that are joining us, Daniel and Michael. Daniel, Michael, thanks for being here. Sue and I will just blab briefly, promise it'll be brief, tell you a little bit about what's going on with Conscious Capitalism, Northeastern Ohio, and hopefully that engenders your continued attendance and involvement. We'll talk about that toward the end of this evening. Got a little agenda to share, and I'm going to do that right now. And once again, hopefully everyone can see the screen. Daniel, Michael, I'll save your own introduction that you're going to do, we know, and Anastasia's tee up. This is about, for just a minute or two, Conscious Capitalism and our Northeastern Ohio chapter. Been around for a long time, 10 plus years, and we're proud to be expanding involvement. And we invite all of you to become increasingly involved. And if you're not, to get involved. Love to have more and more new voices, ideas. And as we were just discussing, now our chapter is global. It is not about any physical place. So today, when we're done with this little quick 1-2 and Anastasia kicks off, Daniel and Michael will tell you a thing or two about their endeavors, their vision. There's a lot we're going to be talking about working cores and all the things that their organization is doing that has to do with not one thing, but many. And the presentation includes a video. We will have breakouts, so be prepared for that, and don't be intimidated by it. If there's no test, no scorekeeping, it's conversation, and then a wrap after. We'll share, then we'll talk a little bit about involvement, and the chapter should be interested. Now, here is the official Conscious Capitalism slide around the 4 tenets, but I'm going to skip past it real quick. And there are 4 things most of you might know, but if not, there is this thing called culture that is such a sort of nebulous, amorphous thing. You know it, you feel it, but you can't necessarily put your finger on it. Mm-hmm. Let's see here. Just bear with me for a little bit of a flow pause. I'm trying to admit folks here. Sue, we're going to have to figure that out. Sorry, folks. All righty. It's perfect timing that Patty Chobe joins at this moment. If anyone knows Patty, she's all about culture. And so the universe speaks to have that forced pause. Welcome, and thanks for joining us, Patty. Culture is this thing that's amorphous. It's under your feet. You can feel it. It's like the ground. It's rich. And we build things on that basis of culture. More importantly, the metaphor here, the image is things grow on a rich culture. In conscious capitalism, a conscious culture is the beginning of everything. Matter of fact, sometimes it's stuff under the surface. And under the surface, once I heard it said, soils that heal. And we'll probably talk about that later. The leaders of conscious culture are conscious leaders, and they are not necessarily fake cartoon women with red flags or banners, but in many ways they are. Conscious leaders are courageous leaders. They stand out. They're larger than life. They do have that beacon of light or that red banner or flag, and they have the courage to talk about the things that really matter and then breathe life into and get the things from under the soil up into reality around culture. And they have that courage to look beyond and out to time and space and really speak the higher purpose, because sometimes it's hard and it's, again, amorphous, and it takes courage to be a little philosophical in the world of business. And the fourth tenet of conscious capitalism is the idea of, it's not just about money. Business can be a force for good. It can elevate humanity, and it's about many stakeholders: the planet, businesses, profit, the economy, and of course people. So that's a little visualization of the four tenets of conscious capitalism, and that's what you'll hear through story. It's a big thing that's happening right now. It's not lecture on concepts academically, but learn from the stories and realities so that concept becomes concrete and real and applicable, and maybe you can use some of that stuff in your own organization or in your own life. Anastasia, thanks again for putting this together, our board member and lead of the learning committee. I think you have a thing or two to say about our featured guests, Daniel and Michael, today. Thanks everybody for being here.
Thanks for the intro, Craig. Hi, everybody. I'm Anastasia, and tonight's event kicks off our programming for this year, which we're hoping to focus on unique and local businesses that really get to the heart of things. And I think it's worth providing a little bit of color around how the organizational relationship came to be between Rust Belt and conscious capitalism. For those of you that have lived in Cleveland, do live in Cleveland, or are familiar with Cleveland, you know that Cleveland's unique in the ratio of degrees of separation to opportunity. The culture of Cleveland produces intimate ties between organizations, and especially those that do passion-driven work. And there's really no shortage of organizations who move in this way in Cleveland. And you're bound to partner, or at least run into those folks on numerous occasions. And many folks within conscious capitalism and our Northeastern Ohio branch have been proxy to Rust Belt riders for many years, whether it's through the utilization of their services or through the work they do within our community. I think my own personal introduction to Rust Belt was through Michael. I think you were sitting next to me at a coffee shop when I first moved here. And you had a book about plants and I had a book about plants, and that was that. It's been very cool to see Rust Belt evolve over the past few years. And there have been numerous notable accomplishments for their organization recently, and there's a lot of exciting new avenues opening up currently, which Dan and Michael will touch on, of course. And we, as a group of folks interested in new imagined futures for capitalism, are interested in the work that Rust Belt riders do because it's heart-driven, it's constantly evolving, and it's done for the betterment of people. So I'm eager to hear from Dan and Michael as they share a bit about not only the company's history, but about recent and ongoing changes and projects and struggles and goals that they're having to uniquely navigate in the realm they work in. And so without further ado, Michael and Dan, I'll let you guys take it away.
Hey everybody, you're going to join me for the sort of first half of this, and then I'm going to hand it off to my business partner and colleague, Michael. I'm going to do a little bit of a presentation, and we will go from there. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to try and provide you with a little bit of an overview of the work that we do, a little bit of why we do it, some opportunities for you all to get involved, and then we'll get into sort of the meat of our conversation that Michael will touch on. I think it was earlier mentioned in the introduction that we're going to get a little bit philosophical, and I think that is very on point because neither Michael or I had a business accounting or marketing class between the two of us when we started this endeavor, Rust Belt Riders. I studied ethics in college, and Michael studied social and political philosophy. And the journey to starting Rust Belt Riders was rather circuitous. No, we are not a bike gang. We are your neighborhood composting company. And so I think that important to our work is not only what we do, but how we do this work. But to start with the what of our work, I think we first and foremost think about ourselves as simultaneously building infrastructure for and solutions to the climate crisis. It is we believe that it is an imperative to act bravely and boldly in light of the acknowledgement of what all science tells us is a pathway and a trajectory towards runaway climate change. And unfortunately, a lot of the conversations related to climate change can be demoralizing, might be a good word, and leave people feeling utterly powerless and helpless. But this report that was authored a few years ago called Project Drawdown has been, for me, as well as for a number of my colleagues, a great source of inspiration to think about how we can positively frame some of the opportunities that might make themselves available by addressing climate change head on. And so Project Drawdown for us was, I think, the most clear evidence we needed to realize that the work that we were doing needed to be more widely proliferated and embraced at scale. And I think that that is really counter to the narrative of much of how we have been sold, in my opinion, a bill of goods around how one is to be perceived as or act when they think of themselves as a climate activist, which is to say, I first really got motivated to work around issues related to climate after having seen An Inconvenient Truth, much like lots of people. And An Inconvenient Truth would lead you to believe that in order to be a climate activist, you must drive a Tesla, which I can't necessarily afford, to erect solar panels, which are also cost prohibitive, or somehow get the permits to put up a wind turbine. And I find those solutions to be highly gizmo focused, often very isolating, and according to Project Drawdown, to really be missing where the substantive solutions to climate change are, which is around our food system. So the graphic that you see here is the findings from Project Drawdown, and they found that the greatest potential for solutions on a sector basis is actually within our food system, more so than where we get our energy from or how we get around town. And so to me, that's a really liberating and deeply democratic realization, because we all eat, we all relate to in some way, shape, or form to food, whether it be the scarcity to food, the gluttonous consumption of food, or anything in between. And I think that that comes as a big surprise to a lot of people, but once you sort of peel back the layers of the onion, as it were, you begin to realize just how dysfunctional and problematic our current food system is. So when you break down food as a sector that contains potential solutions to climate change, we learn very quickly that reducing food waste is the single greatest lever that we have access to slow and reverse climate change. And I think that comes as a shock, maybe because lots of attention is given to eating a plant-rich diet, which to me, I think is important. We all should be consuming foods that require less land and energy. But I think that this trend also sort of points to the gizmoification of things, right? Beyond meat and just egg, are all really easily fundable solutions because they're gizmos, they're gadgets. They offer a new technological innovation that can change your life and world, and in turn solve climate change. But the reality of the fact of the matter is that simple things like what you do with your banana peel are actually measurably more significant than the kind of meat that we are or are not consuming. And so I think that again shocks a lot of people. And I think the reason for that is because most people don't fully grasp the extent to which our food system is so horribly maimed. Namely, in the United States, about 40% of all of the food that is grown will go uneaten. And so some other really fun factoids for you all is that if you are motivated by climate change, as I am, the emissions associated with food entering landfills, which produce methane. Methane is a greenhouse gas roughly 80 times more potent on a 20-year timeline than the stuff that comes out of our tailpipe. Those emissions are contribute to roughly are comparable to making them roughly the third largest contributor to global climate change, only behind the United States or China. And so when we think about being at this really fragile moment in either seeing climate change run away beyond our control or seizing the moment, methane emissions are a form of greenhouse gas that we must urgently cease producing. And one of the easiest ways that we can do that is by ensuring that food not go to landfill, where it is all but guaranteed to produce methane. If you're unmotivated by climate change, perhaps you're economically motivated, in which case you would be horrified to learn that we as a country will spend $218 billion, that's with a B, on the growing, processing, and transportation of food that never gets consumed. That's roughly 1.4% of our GDP on a wasted product. And if economics don't sway you, perhaps morals or ethics will. And we all know too well some of the facts and figures around food insecurity in our community. So just in Northeast Ohio, 1 in 5 children are food insecure. And so what we have is a really broken food system that contained within that brokenness are an abundance of opportunities. And I think that what we're doing is pointing to some of those unique opportunities that can both help to begin drawing carbon out of the air, helping to improve public health, stormwater and air, to create a future that is actually really inspiring and isn't quite as reliant on gizmos and gadgets. And so it's, I think, important to recognize that food waste is fundamentally a very silly problem. I saw Jody Mitchell's on here. Jody is a partner of ours. She runs an organization called Perfectly Imperfect. And so along with folks like Perfectly Imperfect and the Hunger Network of Greater Cleveland, we work to point to these very silly problems because food waste in many cases can be greatly reduced through simple things like meal planning, proper storage, and caring less about what your produce looks like than the nutrition it contains. And so we actively invite all of our clients to, we issue them with a challenge, put us out of business, right? If food waste weren't as prolific as it is, services like ours might not be as necessary. But because things like coffee grounds and pineapple tops, in spite of many of our best efforts, are often needing to be composted, that's where we come in. And so it's only as a matter of last resort that our services should come into your place of business or into your home. And so we're hopefully providing people with the information they need to reduce food waste from being generated in the first place. And so it's important for us as we got going, and we started in 2014, to really understand who is it that is wasting all of this food. You know, we have to have a stern conversation with them. We've got to shake them and have them change their ways. Well, roughly 43% of all food waste occurs at actually the household or consumer level. So you can think of the going to the grocery store and seeing some buy one, get one arugula, thinking that you're getting something of value, but you only have plans to eat one of those and the other just rots in the back of your refrigerator. So that's where some of the food waste occurs at the consumer level. Whereas with businesses, a lot of businesses are preparing meals for other people to consume. And so we largely focus our services on those businesses and households who are generating the lion's share of food waste in the United States. And so the way that our services work, particularly with businesses, is that we try and provide a service very similar to that of a recycling company, but one that is sort of, we think, measurably better. So we like to say that as long as people are consuming food at a place of work, we can work with you. So this is really manifest in like some of our clients. We actively service over 250 unique business locations across Northeast Ohio. And they range from architecture firms with just a few employees all the way to Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse and the Cleveland Clinic and Case Western. So wherever at these locations food is being prepared, we insert bins and infrastructure, like you can see in these images, to become the receptacles for that food waste. So often, you know, people didn't always have the blue bin for recycling. And so we, in a similar vein, are introducing a green bin or a composting bin to our clients' daily operations. And so what that looks like is we provide containers commensurate in size and volume for the amount of food waste that might be generated at a particular location. We then provide an exceptionally clean, timely, and community benefiting service to all of our clients. And what that looks like is basically, a lot of people are concerned that composting might attract pests or be smelly. But a thing that we remind people of often is that the use of our services doesn't manifest new food waste into your operation. It merely segments it into a more properly designed system for food waste. So our bins are lined with compostable bags, and they are exchanged, full bins are exchanged for clean, empty bins at each and every service. So if you can tell me the last time that your dumpster or garbage can was power washed with soap, we joke that we'll pay for your service for a year, right? Which is to say that our service is actually making your waste management practices cleaner. It's also engaging your staff and team in a much more direct way that allows them to think critically about their operation and their place in the as they relate to their work. But we also think about ourselves as like a logistics company, right? We don't want materials sitting around any longer than it absolutely has to. And so we use a host of technologies and services to ensure that we are running very smooth routes to ensure timely service. And then all of the material that we pick up is then processed locally here in Northeast Ohio. There are competitors to the work that we do, but they often drive big rig 16-wheelers and are driving that material across state lines, or are perhaps putting it towards anaerobic digestion, which has a very minimal benefit on our community. But as we did this work of servicing businesses, we learned time and time again from residents that they were very interested in engaging and utilizing services like the ones we were providing to businesses. And so our first attempt at meeting residents where they were was to develop a community drop-off program. And so we now boast around 20 different community drop-off locations across Northeast Ohio. This service works on a subscription basis. So households pay a nominal fee of $10 a month to access any one of our 20 community drop-off locations 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And in exchange, and that's where they would drop off or dispose of their food scraps in a environmentally friendly way. We then service those bins like we do a lot of our commercial accounts, exchanging full bins for clean, empty bins. But as a benefit of your membership, you're also going to get discounts on the resulting products that we create, as well as access to community learning workshops that we carry on over the course of the year. COVID affected us in a not insignificant way. We also realize that we live in an era of massive convenience where things are used to coming to our door. whether that's perfectly imperfect produce getting dropped off to your door or Amazon delivery packages, right? People are accustomed to the comfort and convenience of things coming to them. And so we designed this household pickup program that starts at $30 a month. And we basically function like the milkman of yesteryear. We provide you with a clean 5-gallon bucket with a bag and a lid. You fill up, you put your household food scraps in that bin. And then once a week, we're exchanging that full bin for a clean, empty bin. And just like our drop-off members, you'll get access to the resulting products at a discount, as well as any workshops or other community engagement programs at no additional cost. However, a very fair question would be, well, Dan, it sounds like you're picking up an awful lot of food scraps. What do you do with those food scraps? And so just this past year, we were able to successfully divert nearly 4 million pounds of food waste from going to landfills, almost all of which would have most certainly gone to landfill where it would emit methane gas. And so by diverting that material, we provide a significant infrastructure benefit and climate resilience tool to our community. But in order to do that, we need to be working in tandem with cities, municipalities, partner and other public and private partners to build out the infrastructure necessary to continue to expand our reach. And so what you see here are aerial photos of our old site to the left, in contrast to our new site on the right. And it was only about 2 years ago that we moved on to this new site. And the new site allowed us to continue to process more of the material that we were picking up from our growing number of clients. Without the ability to properly process this food waste into something, it doesn't make a ton of sense, and the market forces don't really encourage our picking it up in the first place. I like to point to the state of recycling right now as being the prime example of how diversion programs go awry. You need end markets and you need processing in a place-based way in order for diversion programs like ours to work. And so we knew that by helping to build out and expand the infrastructure our region has, we can collect and divert more material from going to landfills. But we also knew that we needed to be creating a product with high enough value that it would propel us to continue to invest in that infrastructure. And that's what brought about the inception of Tilth Soil. So if Rust Belt Riders are services, the fruits of those services are our line of products that we sell called Tilth Soil. And so in short, what we're doing is composting. We, in essence, mix the food waste we pick up, which is our source of nitrogen, with carbon, which we get from municipalities in the form of leaf waste and wood chips. By having a combination of carbon and nitrogen, we're off to the races to play host to a giant party for microbial reproduction. If we're able to have a microbial reproduction party, we can ensure the healthy and hygienic decomposition of organic matter into compost. But in order to play host to those microbes, we need to be paying attention to a couple other things, namely air and moisture. These are tiny microscopic carbon-based life forms. So just like you and I, they need access to air and water. And so we make essentially very large piles, and these piles periodically need an injection of air so that we have even decomposition. The outside of that pile needs to become the inside and the inside the outside. But like you and I, if we don't have enough water, we're not going to perform at our best. And if we have too little water, we're going to be underperforming as well. So we're constantly monitoring for air and moisture in our compost piles. And if we can achieve close tabs on these 4 things, composting should be an endeavor that does not produce foul odors, that actually smells quite nice, and very quickly and efficiently can turn what otherwise would be viewed as a waste stream into a resource stream. And so what we are doing is turning food waste into compost, and that compost can then become an agricultural input that helps to serve our community and provide a host of benefits. I think that unfortunately, most people who have historically operated in the composting industry have often been adjacent to waste management. And as a result, they care little about the environmental benefits, the food systems benefits of that work. And because we bring this particular lens, we think that we've gotten quite good at it. So much so that in 2020, the US Composting Council named us the best small-scale composter in the entire United States. And so I mentioned earlier that we needed to have an emphasis on creating value-added products. And so Tilth Soil is our attempt at creating those value-added products. Tilth is a line of specific agricultural products like potting soils and houseplant mixes that are formulated and have at their core compost as the main ingredient in our product. And so Sprout was one of the first products that we came to formulate, and that's our seed starting mix. And we thought it was good, but we wanted a second opinion on it. And so we sent it off to the University of Kentucky that was carrying out a study of other commercially available organic potting soils. And they came to the conclusion that Sprout was among the best performing potting soils available in the whole country. And so as we continue to grow and expand our work, we I think, see ourselves as maybe presently a company that picks up food scraps and happens to make compost or soil, to a soil company that happens to pick up food scraps. And so as we think about our growth and our trajectory, we really see soil as being at the heart of how it is that we grow efficiently and in partnership with others. And so this is sort of what we're doing to advance this idea of the circular economy, where we don't think that we think that waste should be designed out of our economic system. But I think that in addition to that, and what Michael will maybe more succinctly speak to, is that of equal importance is not only just what it is that we're doing, namely the diversion of food waste and creation of value-added goods, but how it is that we're doing that, right? Because we take it as an imperative that we have to be building out the models that can be at once inspiring and dignifying as we build out this future, because a new economy is essential to react to and respond to the climate crisis. And so how we're doing this work is in lockstep with the very clear environmental benefits of what it is that we're doing. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Michael to share a little bit more about the specifics of how it is we got here and some of what we see as challenges to work that we're doing. And so without stealing too much thunder, I'll hand it back over to Michael.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, so when Dan first started, he mentioned how we do what we do is as important as what it is that we're doing. And I think one of the things that our team spends a lot of time thinking about is ensuring that the work that we do prefigures the future we want to see. And so by that, we mean we're not going to wait until someday when all of a sudden everything's different and now we can do things the way they ought to be done. Now we can really, follow through on our values. We think about, we want to do this today. We're not going to wait. So we're acting in the way that we want the world to be in the future. And that comes from a belief that we can't make these exceptions and carry this toxic stuff from previous ways of doing things with us in how we do them now and expect that at some finish line in the future, we'll be able to get rid of that stuff because now things are different. Those things are going to persist with us. And those things, I think, can manifest in a number of different ways and require that we continue to think about some of the things that we might take for granted or are implicit. So how are we thinking about making space for everyone to be able to participate in decisions that affect, if they're spending most of their life at work, these decisions are affecting most of their lives. So prefiguration and ensuring that how we do what we do is core to what we're doing. So some of you may have heard, we've recently formalized our conversion to a worker cooperative. And so the company is now owned and run by 4 individuals, and it has created pathways for team members to be able to become worker owners moving forward. And again, I can't overemphasize the importance of thinking about, there's an element of unlearning, I think, that we do as well, because we've all worked in other atmospheres or environments that aren't really facilitating the type of culture that was mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. So one of the things we've been really intentional about from day one is creating a culture where everyone in the organization feels like they can contribute to the, not feels like, where they actually can contribute to the decisions in the organization. So we've always used consensus-based decision-making. We've always had transparent financials. If there are folks on the team that aren't familiar with the financial reports that typically come along with running a business, then we create workshops, and we have time for those individuals to come learn about how to interpret an income statement and how it relates to a balance sheet and a statement of cash flows. Those are all things that we prioritize at a company that weren't prioritized at any company I'd ever worked at before. Another component of the transition to formal transition to worker ownership is that we created a couple of different classes of shares. And I think that it's been a fun learning experience for us to really be on the cutting edge of what it looks like to explore alternative financing structures for businesses that don't have what we typically think of as an exit for startup companies. So as Dan mentioned, as we were really getting going, we've been through a number of business incubators and courses. So the C-Change, the Social Entrepreneurship Accelerator, we went through the Jumpstart Core City Impact Program, as well as the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses Program. And as we grew, the different networks were putting us in touch with potential resources to help us grow our business as we saw additional opportunities in the market. But our vision for our company, when I say our, another thing that's really important is that we have regular visioning meetings with all the individuals in the organization, so that the North Star of the company is not only clear to everyone, but it also has been decided with the input of everyone in the organization. So our vision for the company wasn't to go public, it wasn't to be acquired by a bigger version of the company, and it wasn't to bring on investors who would then sell their shares to another tier of investors at some point in the future. And so it really forced us to do some additional exploration and learn about how other people that are doing a lot of work in this space to find how other people are finding ways to do this that may not already exist, or maybe some kind of Frankensteining of other versions of doing this. So we wound up working with a really great attorney out of Boulder, Colorado, and we created 2 classes of shares to be able to facilitate our growth in a way that maintained all of our values. And so there's a Class A shares that are available to worker owners of the business. And in order to qualify for a Class A share, you have to be with the company for 3,000 hours, and you've got to contribute $3,000 to purchase the share. And there's 1 share to each worker. Only 1 worker can have 1 share, and that translates to voting as well. And if the worker doesn't have the $3,000 on hand at the moment in cash, the company can make a loan to that person, and they can pay it back through their paycheck. So the point there is there needs to be a level of skin in the game, but it also can't be inaccessible, because that defeats the point. So that's how you can become a Class A shareholder. You also need to be voted in by a supermajority of existing Class A shareholders. So once you meet those requirements, you aren't entitled to a Class A share. You still need to be approved by ultimately the members of the board. And then we did a class of shares, Class B preferred stock. And those shares have a fixed dividend that's paid out annually. And then there's a redemption period for those shares as well. And so there's a put and call options for both the company and for the investors. So if the investors say, okay, I'm ready to cash out, they have an opportunity to do that at a period. And if the company would like to purchase those shares back from those investors, that's a right that the company has as well. And it was through working with our attorney, who's very experienced in cooperative law and these alternative forms of fundraising, that we've been able to build these out in our bylaws. And that was how we had come up with how we're going to be able to finance our growth as an organization that doesn't seek to have this traditional exit. And I think that there's a community of, there's a really big community of impact investors that are either managing endowments or interested in investing in climate resilience solutions that also have a return. And I think that what Daniel had shared earlier about the amount of waste, both economically and materially involved in food, that there's a significant market there to be pursued. And we think about our model in terms of cyclical integration as well. So the idea that things are moving in a cycle are a step towards a circular regenerative economy. Those aren't what we put together isn't the only way to go about doing this. There's a number of other really great solutions, everything from structured exits, where the investment is made with the intention of buying those shares back definitely in the future, based on anything from a percentage of revenue, a percent gross margin, some objective metric that structures that exit. Our model has a form of redeemable equity in it, but then there's also revenue-based financing models. And then recently I had the opportunity to speak on a panel with an MBA student from Duke who proposed a financing mechanism that's currently being used, but it really seems underutilized at this point. And it could be, I think, has a really great opportunity to be used in the composting sector. And that's called outcomes-based financing. And the idea is that there are beneficial externalities that come along with composting food waste. So I know many people, I'm sure, have heard of negative externalities, which are things like air pollution, water pollution, noise pollution, generally things that have an adverse effect on our communities in both an economic and a material way. And those costs are then not baked into the costs of producing whatever is being produced. Now, the flip side of that is we have beneficial externalities that come along with implementing a certain service. So composting, for example, Daniel shared how everything from reducing greenhouse gas emissions to retaining water and reducing stormwater runoff are all economic benefits to someone. And so outcomes-based financing seeks to quantify the economic benefits of an activity such as composting, find who it is that's economically benefiting from this practice, and then having the free cash flows from the savings go towards paying back the initial startup costs in order to implement the solution. And composting, I think, is one great example, or a great candidate as type of alternative financing, because the startup costs can be significant. However, the short-term and long-term savings to anyone from a municipality, county, state, those free cash flows can be freed up to be able to help to finance the project in the long term. So that was a more recent and I think really cutting edge model that we're hoping to explore in terms of how we might be able to finance growth as well. But we're really excited about those types of opportunities, and we're seeing a community that's increasingly interested in what's being called non-extractive financing. So the idea there is that one organization defines it as simply returns to the lender not ever exceeding the wealth created by the borrower using the capital. So colloquially said is about a borrower will never be worse off than before working with us. And an example of an organization using non-extractive finance would be the Seed Commons, I think is one of my favorites right now. They're doing some really, really cool work funding worker cooperatives in a way that's non-extractive. And if anybody's interested in any additional reading, one of the best resources I've found out there is called Adventure Finance. And I'll double check the name of the author here really quick, but she has done a really good job scouring the field for creative ways to finance growth for companies that don't have typical exit strategies. So I think we can probably leave it there and maybe do the breakout room and get into some wonkier questions if people are curious to learn more.
I think, Dan, I might have seen your hand up there tentatively. I don't know if you wanted to add something, Daniel.
Yeah, just a quick add-on to Michael's comment, right? I think that a lot of what we're postulating is that like the infrastructure of the future that is climate resilient must also be financed in a regenerative way, right? And so there's lots of conversation about like what is infrastructure in the Build Back Better program, right? We think that like our best case at having a resilient future looks like composting being ubiquitous, like not optional, but ubiquitous. And we have city and municipal and federal bonds for highways and stormwater treatment, but none of that financing is an option or a vehicle accessible to composting. And we think that given the massive beneficial externalities of this kind of work, as well as direct community benefit and community wealth creating possibilities, we need to come up with new creative ways to finance infrastructure level capacity like what we're seeking.
And if we want to get really nerdy, I think that there's an opportunity to use green bonds here as well. So the idea of having green bonds be the startup capital to finance the infrastructure of something like composting, and then have the free cash flows that the municipality or county or state sees from the savings be able to pay back those bonds. Ultimately, with the best case, there's even more cash left over after that. So they're able to repay those bonds and they're saving money, within years. I think that's a pretty cool and creative way to think about use of green bonds and outcomes-based financing.
Gents, I'm taking a liberty to indulge here real quick. First of all, thank you. It's so inspiring to hear not just the concepts to which you speak, but the story associated with it. One of the things that strikes me before we get into breakout here, and maybe can be part of breakout, is the fact that you humbly stated not necessarily business people at first. So purpose-driven leaders emerging into business. And my quick assessment, I'm not here to judge, but you guys obviously know business. And what fascinates me is purpose-driven leaders emerging into being in business. And then there are business people who are insatiably under the profit motive gun to produce and grow and exit. And they, in their heart, want to move toward principle and purpose and meaning, but they're in the machine. And I wonder how both groups, if I were to categorize, which I resist doing too much and stereotype, but I'd be fascinated to understand how many move from purpose to business and from business to purpose. And maybe there's a lot to learn from each other. A thought bubble that hit me. Anastasia, I lean to you for our exercise and challenge for breakout.
Sure. So I think first Dan was going to share just a little brief 3-minute video on tilth and Rust Belt. And then as we go into breakouts that will be randomized, you'll either be in a group with Michael or Dan. And I think overall the goal is for that to be kind of a comfortable space for people to introduce themselves and then chat about, has this all been new? What are you thinking about? What are you excited by? What more do you want to know about Rust Belt riders and tilth and their goals? And the financing structures that they explained. So we'll have about 15 minutes in those rooms to just kind of get to know each other and really dig in with Dan and Michael. And then when we come back, we'll have somebody from each of those breakout rooms just kind of debrief for the group and share some of the interesting stuff you guys chatted about. So Dan, if you want to share that video and if that makes sense.
And then if somebody could yell at me quickly if the audio isn't working, that would be great.
It's better now.
Okay.
We've gone from 2011 to like 2017.
Okay. Well, I'm mostly concerned about the video, it's audio rather than my speaking it. So we'll see. Can you hear that? Was there a noise? Was there like a little guitar strum?
No, no guitar, and it's a bit jaggedy.
Could you perhaps, Anastasia, I sent you the link. Is there a chance
Yeah.
you'd be able to do it at
Yep.
the risk of mine not? Cool.
Can everybody hear that? Okay.
At Tilth Soil, we make a family of products for farmers, home gardeners, houseplant parents, and everyone in between. Our soils are made from recycled food waste that otherwise would be sent to landfills where they would emit methane gas and accelerate climate change. Our nutrient-rich, living compost is the foundation of our family of products. We are on a mission to feed people, not landfills. We transform your food waste into beautiful soils that can help to feed our community and repair our planet. Regardless of where you are on your journey, Tilth Soil is there to support you, your plants, and most of all, our planet. We believe that we can change our food system and our planet for the better by working with growers just like you. At Tilth, we believe that health begins in our soil.
Cool. Okay. Craig and Sue, are we ready for breakout rooms then?
Of anyone. But we had Bill, Kyle, and David, and so if any of them would like to, we just sort of chatted. I don't know.
It was a good conversation about business and accounting and how to get your word out, and where Daniel's and the team have gone actually. So there was it was more just conversation than necessarily any takeaways. Kyle, I don't know if you had a takeaway because you may have had a takeaway there that I missed, but.
Well, I was very interested at the end, if you actually want to follow up on that a little bit, about the compostable items and not having that value out of it. I know, so I assist with running a conference down here, and we specifically actually paid the facility. The facility offers like a fully compostable lunch option for the attendees. That of course costs us a decent chunk more in order to do it, but makes our attendees happy. So and we could afford it, and it was like, yay. But I'm very interested in terms of like how we can like better migrate that to an even more sustainable system than what we're getting out of it now.
Yeah, so to sort of briefly touch on that, if that's what this time is for, I just sort of was sharing that we do sell compostable serviceware, as it's called, but I think are increasingly critical of it for a variety of reasons, not least of which is it closely mirrors this take, make, waste model that we're absolutely trying to destroy. And so, but additionally, there's economic factors that make it like economically disadvantageous to take. Put another way, the compost that results from a stream that has in it compostable serviceware cannot, under any circumstances, be labeled or sold as certified organic. As a result, what you're making is a commodities compost, which is a very flush market that has very low value assigned to it. So our potting soils, for example, can sell for hundreds of dollars a cubic yard, whereas a commodity compost from most landscapers might sell from anywhere from $30 to $40 a cubic yard. And we can't make any certified organic compost from material that we're collecting that contains compostable products. All that to say, we are very interested in moving facilities towards higher degrees of reusability. We've joked about starting like a dishwasher fund to buy plates and utensils and cups for places that have historically used disposables, so that you can use a product thousands of times rather than just once before it gets pitched. But we have to get our shiny object bat regularly and destroy shiny objects, and perhaps a dishwasher fund is not the thing that we should be chasing at this moment. So we try and make sure that we don't go chasing shiny objects.
In the effort of abundance, right? Abundant thinking. You put that out there and somebody else might run with it and partner with you.
Mm-hmm.
As long as we're not in scarcity mode, I think that's cool.
Yeah, so you're speaking to not only the power of abundance versus scarcity. What's really interesting hearing this conversation tonight is also the distinction or the possibilities of me, I want what I want, and we, what we can get together. That me, we thing is something that's striking me as and I'd be fascinated. Again, you're doing, the team's doing breakout reporting here, so I don't want to dominate, but I'd be really interested in knowing how we can, from a philosophical standpoint, sort of engender that broader thinking. Your business model is about a bigger picture. It is truly multi-stakeholder, like conscious capitalism is all about. And yet in our society, so right now, me, what I want in the next 2 minutes, and how do you connect those mentalities? Anyway, just kind of waxing on as we talk.
I think the intention of the remaining time is to really do that, not just a debrief, but open Q&A. So those sorts of deeper questions that folks have. I mean, Dan, Michael, what are your thoughts on even Craig's question?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind for me is and again, so part of what we think a lot about is this distinction between the me and we, or rather, we want to simultaneously create a space where everybody's able to, self-actualize and bring their fullest self to their place of work, while also having their well-being be tied to being a member of a community. And so there's this navigating individual desires and pursuing things that are fulfilling to you, while also being a member of a community. Navigating that tension, I think, is like ultimately the stuff of life. And we talk a lot about systems thinking and bringing a systems thinking lens to the work. And that's maybe more of a framing than it is an answer to the question, but definitely something we think about a lot. And incentives, alignment of incentives, which I think the worker co-op brings to the table as well.
One of the so we similarly in our group with Michael, we got to know each other a little bit, and then I had a few questions on. I jokingly said, even though I work in finance, I have no idea what half of this stuff is. Green bonds sounded really interesting, but on our way out, Lynn asked Michael a question that I'm sure others would be interested in, which is like, what are the KPIs of like an investment where it's not just about the exit? So Michael, I'll let you maybe talk a bit about that.
And I think Lynn was also asking specifically about impact metrics, right? And that this impact investing as a space that we're seeing. And for those that aren't familiar, the idea of impact investing is investing in social solutions that also have returns. And another way that I've come to understand impact investing is through how endowments are managing their funds. So the idea that an endowment has 95% of its investment in, let's say a typical old school endowment has 95% of its investments in maybe potentially problematic entities, oil and gas, for example, that are creating these issues, and then they take 5% of their, investment or their endowment and invest that in philanthropy and grants in the interest of fixing the problems that their other 95% of their investments are causing in the first place. Thankfully, over the past, I don't know, there's another, Real Impact is another book that I'd recommend to anybody that's interested in this, but there's a trend towards rethinking how endowments are managing their funds. And they're saying, we're going to take some of the 95% investments and invest those in for-profit entities that are working on solving some of these climate issues. And those organizations also have a return. So impact investing, and really important for impact investing are what are the different metrics that you're tracking. So an impact investing firm might say, all right, well, that's not the return that I'd typically be looking for in the marketplace. But I think that I would be okay with taking a less than market return on our investment, and in order to have these additional impacts. And it's extremely important for organizations that are doing this kind of work to be tracking their impact metrics. And fortunately for us, there's one big one that goes a long way, which is how much food waste have we diverted from the landfill? And as Daniel had said before, we're able to take that number and translate it into the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that we've been able to avoid by not sending it to the landfill and having the landfill emit the methane. So that's the number one for us. But we also think about, listen to an excellent interview that I could also share in the chat here in a minute with a woman who was formerly the impact investment manager for Techstars. And they're looking at these impact investing, these impact metrics for their investments. And she says to herself one day, if all of these startup companies that are doing climate work are successful, what is that going to do to income and wealth disparity? And she realized that it was going to continue to exacerbate wealth distribution and wasn't going to help build community wealth or help alleviate some of these other income disparity or wealth disparity issues. And so she then left Techstars, and she's now with another firm that's basically an investment bank that's working with cooperatives. So I'll try to find that interview and share it in the chat. But she's awesome. Her name's Zoe.
Michael. Oh, Sue.
I was going to say, and if you can't find it, to put it in the chat, kick it to us, and we'll put it
distribute
anyway.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Michael, what's so interesting about what you just described is this 95-5 thing. It doesn't mean the 5% is ill-intended or disgenuine, However, if the 5% can be sprinkled a little bit into everything that's done, so that it becomes the 95 intrinsically, where it becomes part of the principle, and it becomes part of the modality, the way of being. You Chance, were talking earlier about the way versus the what. The way we go about things as much as what we do, and that is such a powerful notion, because I think, at risk of judging, many organizations, again, well-intended, will say, well, we do all this other stuff, and then we're just going to like fly in and just do this really great thing, and that makes up for everything else, and we're good.
Well, that's all we're talking about.
Right.
We're talking about
Yeah.
it 95% of the time.
I also want to validate what you had said earlier about their fiduciary responsibility, right? Like there's a very legal element of how the funds are deploying capital. And I have the privilege of being in a workshop right now with a number of fund managers that are navigating this tension between their ethics and their fiduciary responsibility. And it has been just so rewarding, but also at times really challenging and astounding to see individuals wrestling with this tension between their ethics and their values and their knowledge of what's happening in the world, whether it's income disparity or climate change, but also feeling like their hands are tied by fiduciary responsibility. And I guess that's a larger question that I have that's, I think, particularly relevant to an organization, conscious capitalism, is how do we consider climate solutions in a world where even people that are feeling the internal tension of their personal ethics not being able to be realized through their, like what they're doing in their funds, their hands are tied. And a terrible fear of mine is that we live in a world where market-based solutions aren't going to help us fix this.
Anastasia, leaning on you.
And I was going to say, Anastasia, I really think that this is that there's some programming notes there. That's a conversation to create.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm tongue in cheek. I'm really serious. Yeah.
And the thing I would just add to some of what Michael was saying is that, like, we talk about KPIs, and I think a lot of what we track are like sort of external facing KPIs, right? We are quantifying for our clients the amount of material they have diverted. And so, like, I'm really proud, and I'm almost embarrassed to say that, like, we are having our first internal sustainability meeting tomorrow. So I want to know, how many miles do we drive every year? What is our environmental impact of running diesel skid loaders? And if we can't raise money from would-be investors while also getting ourselves to climate neutral or negative, well, then how have we set ourselves up for just modeling and mimicking that 95.5, right? And so we also have a fiduciary obligation, but if we can't have electric vehicles and solar panels and be capturing rainwater and be sourcing all of our inputs from our region and making sure that, like, our scope 3, like, supply chain is ethical as well, then we're punching a hole in the planet too. And so, like, so much of, like, the ripple, it is easy for us to talk about, like, look at the good we're doing for our community. Look at the good we're doing on behalf of our clients. But if we don't hold the mirror up to ourselves, we have very little ground to stand on.
And the only thing I would say to that, right, because there's a tension in all of this, and particularly with startups or earlier stage companies of, right, there's also the saying of no margin, no mission. So you gotta make a profit, and you gotta have margin, and you gotta balance all of those pieces. And as you grow, hopefully there's more margin and more capacity to continue down the path.
Right. It's more to say that, like, we are beginning to go down the road of internalizing what our current externalities, right?
Yeah.
We are challenging everybody that we're talking to internalize externalities. Now that we are getting to the place of being economically sustainable, we we owe it to our community, to our staff, and to ourselves to begin to internalize some of those external factors, right? And so while still maintaining margin, right? And so how is it that we get to electric vehicles while still maintaining margin? And I think we are beyond the point in our inflection that like there aren't any other pitch competitions we're going to win, right? There's unlikely more fellowships to be had, and so now it is purely prove out the business model, expand it, and make sure there's incremental margin to keep doubling down on our values.
Daniel, and team, I'm sure we're probably rounding out as it gets later, but I'd be really interested if you could help me understand what an externality is. Especially when we think with the lens of me versus we, what's internal, what's external, what's you, what's me, what's an externality in your view?
Yeah, an externality is emitting greenhouse gases that accelerate climate change and have no cost associated with them. An externality is exploitation. An externality is the perpetuation of systems of oppression. An externality is anything that we don't factor into our accounting scheme. Things that are voiceless, that can't advocate for themselves. Yeah, I don't know. Michael, wax.
Yeah, I think the last piece there really nailed it. I was just going to go straight Milton Friedman, and it's just it's a cost that actually isn't realized by the company that's doing the thing. And I wanted to clarify, Dan, I think your sentiment I agreed with, but the idea is like it is a cost. It's just not baked into the cost of making the thing. Somebody else pays it later. And again, this is why I was happy to have studied what I did, is I didn't go into it with this intention. I came into it like, let's learn about how this thing works. I remember reading Capitalism and Freedom and seeing the section on externalities and being like, hold on, like how does that, like the incentive from a fiduciary perspective is to externalize as many costs as you possibly can, but then when we pollute all the waterways, somebody else is going to have to, it's just ridiculously short-sighted. So I think that another way to think about our fiduciary, another way that I like reframing what it means to think about fiduciary responsibilities, what time scale are we talking about here?
Yeah.
The species has been around for 200,000 years.
Right.
Think about fiduciary responsibility on 1,000-year time scale.
Right.
And what's in your client's best interest if it's going to make them sick?
Or kill everybody.
Or kill everyone else, right? Yeah.
And yet in our modern hyper-connected world, our time scale is the next 2 seconds if we're not careful.
Right. And I think that Michael mentioned that like we do lots of visioning meetings, right? And like often, and I understand why, like far too intimately and through the course of far too many panic attacks and sleepless nights, right? It's easy and the natural thing to think on a month-to-month, quarter-to-quarter basis. But like when we do our visioning meetings, we're talking about like 15, 20 years down the future, right? I don't want to be and our model, right? We don't seek to be acquired, right? Like I want a business like ours in every community, everywhere, because it always makes sense to have, right? And so like to do that, we need a habitable planet. And so I think that often a lot of businesses, a lot of social enterprises exist to eliminate a problem, right? Like we're acknowledging the reality of the human condition, which is that sometimes there's food that can't be eaten. And there needs to be infrastructure for that. And we will always be growing food, and there are better or worse ways to grow food. And like, let's build it better. And so I don't know. That's.
But Daniel, what's so interesting about that is that the me, we, now, later continuum are on similar planes. The right now is me. The later, the long term is we. And if we can't think later we're going to be stuck in now me.
Can we pull the we closer in time? Can we pull closer together? That's
I think Yeah, I think that's a really, because I mean, when we start to think about like and I think that's a really, I love that because we can. And there are communities that are like experiencing the adverse effects of these things. And it's marginalized communities. So there are folks that are experiencing the downside from what we're talking about right now. And a lot of times, yeah, it's not, again, additional externalities. I think that, you know, those communities are picking up the costs of us being able to, you know, afford things or make things the way that we do now. That is happening.
Just to jump in, I think that like this like just bringing up a couple of ideas that like I don't often get to talk about. So first is like I think that environmentalists are among the worst and least inspiring group of marketers ever to exist. The vision of the future as painted by most environmentalists is that painted around scarcity and around like lack of abundance, right? And so this like, it is no surprise then to me that all of the technological gizmos and gadgets that are positing a more sustainable future are self-driving Teslas, are countertop Lumi composters, are solar panels, and are underground bunkers and aquaponic systems, right? They are not community-based composting and food production systems powered by community-owned solar, powered by, you know, like, and so this idea of like the me and we, right? Like the me is like, I'm going to get in a bunker, I'm going to grow as much food as I can and put it in jars and bury it under the ground. And as long as I got me covered, we're good, right? Because I don't care what happens to anybody else. But the we that like Michael's calling in, that we're all calling, like I think that we're trying to get to is like, we actually like, it's a far cooler and inspiring vision of the future that is one that like has yet to be even invented or conceived of, right? And we think that part of that is worker ownership. We think that part of that is like rethinking how we have commerce and where we grow our food and how we relate to our energy. And so I think that if we can get people to have this positive, like eco-utopian worldview, like the future actually becomes like, let's get there faster and we'll get there faster together. Yeah.
Anastasia, leaning on you.
I know that we're going to wrap up here in a few minutes, but I think any outstanding questions, comments, thoughts. I know I specifically, Michael, want to hear more about the investment options in Rust Belt and what that looks like and what that would be like for people like us. And if we know people who would want to do that. I know you said the low end is 5,000, but maybe for folks who are / aren't familiar with investing concepts, what does it look like to support Tilth and Rust Belt now moving forward? Me, we, everybody.
Yeah, I think so. To speak specifically to the terms of the Class B shares that we've created, they, as I mentioned in the smaller group, they pay a fixed 7% dividend, and there's a redemption period 5 years after the date of the purchase of the shares, at which point the investor can put those shares to the company, where the company buys them back at the purchase price plus any accrued dividends, or the company can actually elect to buy those back from the investors as well. So that's the nature of the Class B preferred stock that we put in place when we executed our new bylaws. But in addition, as we mentioned before, you know, we're really in a sales mode when it comes to soil blends. So we've got a number of different soil blends that have several applications, everything from raised beds in your garden to starting seeds. So that's another way that you know, those interested could support the organization. If you're more interested and you'd like to dig a little bit deeper into the details, or just have a follow-up conversation about what we've put together in terms of preferred Class B stock, you can follow up with me. My email is michael@rustbeltriders.com. I think that might have been shared in the, I'm not sure if that was shared in any of the information for the event, but if you'd like to discuss further, I'd be happy to talk with you more. Oh, thank you, Dan.
And Michael, at the closing slide, we have replicated both your email addresses. So if someone's jotting it down,
And the website is very direct.
Good.
Usfeltwriters.com.
yeah.
So
All
if
right.
people wanted to get involved in the program, right, the composting program, and or buying the soil, do we just go to your website, or where do we find your soil, or can you give us those details?
Yeah. Thanks, Lynn. Dan, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Again, I tried to make the distinction in the presentation. Rust Belt Riders provides services. So that could be either our home pickup service or community drop-off service for the individual, or if your place of work is interested in using our services in a operational capacity, all of that information could be found at rustbeltriders.com. If you have a gardening need, want to start some houseplants, or need any soil, Tilth Soil carries a variety of products that can be purchased through our website most easily. We are working on more retail partnerships, but for any of you who know anything about retail margins, we are much more inclined to sell it directly to you. So we would invite you to check out our website. We've got a live chat on both websites in order for you to just ask any questions and talk to somebody on our team directly.
Thanks.
Any last minute questions from anybody or thoughts?
I just want to
think-
appreciate the conversation. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, Michael, I was just going to say, I think this is awesome. And if we can elevate what you guys are doing, not just what you're doing, while that's really important, but also how you're doing it, I think it's equally important and really awesome. I think you are a shining star in Cleveland, Ohio. And I thank you for your leadership. And you may not necessarily like that word, but I think you really are a great example of conscious capitalism in Northeast Ohio. So thank you for what you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Yeah, the forthrightness and who you guys are and what you guys do definitely shines. So thanks for joining us. I really appreciate you guys putting that together and spending the time with us and talking with us. I agree, Michael, it's been a great conversation, and we'll figure out how best to stay connected as well with our missions. Craig and Sue.
Yes. At the risk of getting gushy, this is the stuff at the end of the day when the juice happens, and those of us lucky enough to stick around to this moment feel the energy, the heart part that is so powerful. It's so powerful. The business sense stuff I think we can figure out, but that true shining star leadership thing and clarity of purpose, and you guys, man, thank you so much.
Yes.
To risk being rote for a minute, there's 2 last slides and then we're done. It almost feels weird to do this because the conversation was the key. And let's see if I can even find in my cluttered screen what I was looking for here. There is a couple of things to say very quickly. Just save the date. April 12th is the next time we do this together again, virtually or some combination.
Details to be formalized and announced.
And just stay tuned. And a big part of the stay tuned has to do with the open door. There's just such a new energy. I don't want to say new energy. There's a continued energy, a new page of energetics. Real live committees and committee chairs, and Anastasia, this wouldn't have happened tonight without your leadership and learning and programming, and the communications team is taking shape. I think Michael Furkovic joined us late, and thank you for your leadership. And we're formulating structures that sustain this entity in our chapter, building partnerships and affiliates, and there's all kinds of stuff that you can do. And so you see 2 contacts there. Paul Etzler, who was with us earlier this evening, just happens to be. It's not like only Paul, but Paul and I have been sort of the conduit to involvement, whatever shape that takes, as Sue described. And but most importantly tonight is about Daniel and Michael, and their contact info is promised. Take a quick screenshot if you didn't jot down their email addresses. And I think we're at a wrap here. We're going to screen share.
Thank you, but that's okay. The last one was a big thank you, and it's a thank you to everyone attending, and especially to Daniel and Michael. We truly appreciate your energy, your time being here, and your work. The message is powerful. Thank you.
All right, everybody.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having us.
Take
Be
good care.
well.
You guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yes, thank you everyone so much.